Hello there, I'm Nicholas, and this is On Listening with Chi Rising Studio. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'd like to explore something that surrounds us constantly, yet often goes unnoticed: the natural rhythm of returning. We see it in the way day turns to night, and night back to day. We experience it in the turning of seasons, in the way winter's stillness eventually yields to spring's movement. These cycles of returning aren't just beautiful patterns in nature, they're profound teachers about the art of listening. Think about the breath for a moment. Each breath naturally flows out and then returns. There's no forcing needed. The return happens by itself. This simple pattern holds a deep wisdom about all kinds of listening. And just as the breath naturally returns, our capacity to listen deeply also moves in cycles of engagement and release. In nature, we never find straight lines that continue forever. Instead, we discover cycles, spirals, and patterns of return. A river doesn't flow in a straight line. It meanders, creating curves and loops, sometimes even doubling back on itself before continuing its journey. Yet it never loses its essential nature as water, and it never loses its direction towards the sea. Our practice of listening follows similar patterns. There are times when we feel deeply connected, when our attention is clear and present, when listening seems to happen with ease. Yet there are also times when we feel disconnected, when listening requires more effort, when we seem to have lost our way. The wisdom of return teaches us that these variations are not only natural, they're essential to the depth of our practice. Consider how a tree grows. It doesn't extend its branches in a constant, unbroken motion. Instead, it grows in cycles, with periods of visible expansion followed by periods of apparent stillness. During winter, when the tree appears dormant, essential processes continue beneath the surface, and it's this hidden preparation that makes visible growth in spring possible. Our capacity for deep listening develops in a similar way. Sometimes we're actively expanding our understanding, taking in new perspectives and growing in visible ways. And other times, we're in a period of integration, when the insights we've gathered are being absorbed more quietly. Both phases are equally important. The wisdom of return also teaches us about effort and ease in our listening practice. Just as a river doesn't force its way through a mountain, but rather flows around it, finding the path of least resistance, we can learn to listen with this same natural ease. Now, this doesn't mean we never face challenges. The river certainly encounters obstacles, but it means we learn to work with rather than against the natural flow of our attention. When we understand this principle of natural return, we can approach listening with more patience and trust. If you notice your mind wandering during a conversation, this awareness itself is a kind of return. If you find yourself disconnected from the subtle signals of your body, the moment you notice this disconnection is already the beginning of return. Each recognition, each coming back to awareness, strengthens our capacity to listen deeply. In TCM, we understand that health isn't a fixed state, but a dynamic balance, a continuous dance of adjustment and return. And the same is true for our practice of listening. Sometimes we're more attuned to emotional nuances, and other times we're more aware of physical sensations. Sometimes we're drawn to listen to the natural world, and other times to the subtle movements of our own thoughts. Each phase enriches our practice. This understanding of cycles can transform how we approach difficulties in listening. Instead of seeing challenges as obstacles to overcome, we can recognize them as natural parts of the cycle. Just as winter isn't an obstacle to spring, but a necessary part of the annual cycle, periods of apparent disconnection, or even difficulty, aren't obstacles to deep listening. They're part of its development. Think about how waves move on the ocean. Each wave rises, peaks, and returns to the surface of the water. Yet the ocean itself remains unchanged by this constant motion. And in the same way, our capacity for deep listening remains constant, even as our experience of it moves through various cycles. The waves of attention and inattention, connection and disconnection, rise and fall on the surface of a deeper, more fundamental awareness. The wisdom of cycles helps us to understand that nothing is permanent. Not the challenges, not even the breakthroughs. When listening feels easy and clear, we can appreciate these moments whilst knowing they will naturally shift. And when listening feels challenging, we can trust in the cycle of return, knowing that clarity will naturally emerge again. Every conversation has its own rhythm of engagement and space, of speaking and listening, of understanding and uncertainty. When we trust these natural cycles, we can remain more present with whatever phase we're experiencing, rather than trying to force a particular state. Listening isn't just about hearing words or sounds. It's about attunement to ourselves, to others, to the natural world around us. This attunement naturally moves through cycles of clarity and even confusion, of depth and surface, of connection and apparent separation. And understanding these cycles helps us trust the process more deeply. Remember that your own practice of listening is unique, moving through its own natural cycles. There's no need to force it to look like someone else's practice. Just as every river finds its own path to the sea, your practice will find its own way of deepening and returning to center. As we bring this second season to an end, remember that each ending is also a beginning. The wisdom of return reminds us that growth isn't linear, it's cyclical, spiraling, always coming back to center, but each time with new understanding. Whatever challenges you face in your practice of listening, trust in this natural pattern of return. If you found value in this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who might also find it interesting. Your support helps us continue to create this space for learning and growth. You can find out more about our studio and the podcast at chirising.studio.